Hello, everyone. Welcome to the virtual black box here today. It's Thursday. If you didn't know what day it was, that's a very common question in our house right now is, what day is it today? Wherever you're calling in from, I want to welcome you. I saw people from Minnesota, from all over Atlanta, from Henderson, Tennessee. That must probably be a friend of Brad's. Saw someone from Ohio, from Arizona. I see Peachtree Corners, Georgia, all over the place. Welcome to this gathering. I have a few announcements before we get into our conversation with Brad. If this is your first time with any event with Plywood, Plywood is a nonprofit in Atlanta that leads a community of startups doing good. We've been doing this work for 10 years and entering our 11th, and we're hopeful we'll do it for another 10 years. I'm sure whatever you're coming to this conversation with, this is unprecedented times, obviously. And you can come in with all kinds of questions. All of us have questions right now. There's a lot of things we don't have answers for. But I want to encourage you and tell you that we're here for you. Our organization exists to help people get whatever ideas they have off the ground. And hopefully we can encourage you along the way. So the first thing I want to do is on the right with the comments, I'd like to encourage you, maybe just take a second, and it says say something nice down there, but maybe use an emoji that best describes your feeling today. Take a moment to fill up the feed. Say, how do you feel? Is it scared? Is it angry? Is it happy? Is it content? Use an emoji, fill it in, just get you to start commenting in some way. So take a second and do that real quick. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you for that. A little bit of crazy fun. I love it. Keep filling it in. On the bottom of the thing, and keep doing that as you guys are trying to decide what you do, I'm going to share a few announcements with you. On the bottom of the screen, you'll see a few things. One is you'll see a poll. There's already a poll in there. Let's see, what's the first poll today? How would you classify how your feelings are today, kind of going alongside what I'm making you do on the right. And there's a bunch of other people on here. You can ask a question. If you click on that, you can ask a question. The second half of the conversation, I'm going to be referring to those questions that asked to Brad. You can look at what other people have questions for, or the questions that they have, and you can vote on them. The ones that kind of go to the top are the ones we're going to spend time on. So make sure you look at those questions, ask a question, and vote on the best questions. Do the polling, make commenting. And if this is an encouragement to you today, again, Plywood is a nonprofit. There's a little button on the bottom that says donate to Plywood people. I'd love for you to consider giving $5, $10, just supporting the work that we do so we can make it keep happening. A few things we're doing in this digital season that we have a program we call Path by Plywood. And if you have an idea that you need to be working on, this is a program for you. You can go to pathbyplywood.com, and on April 15th, we're starting a new group. We're actually starting 3 groups at once, and it's pay what you want. So you can either pay $49, $99, or $199. If you don't find value in it in the end, you can get your money back. We're not in it to make a bunch of money, but we have learned that when you invest in this program, you are more committed to it. So this is a 6-week program. You'll do it with other people. You'll have all over the internet. And this is something maybe that you can work on to get your idea to come to life. So go to pathbyplywood.com. Next week, we have another incredible conversation with Teresa Ward and Shelton Davis. And we're going to talk about collaboration. How do you collaborate? How do you work with people given this new reality that we're in today? You might be working on a project right now and you need some advice. Well, we also have a little thing that we're doing for you. You can sign up to meet with an advisor through our community. We have 30 advisors that have committed to doing 20-minute sessions with people that have a whole bunch of questions. Whatever your project you're working on, you might need advice on the CARES Act. You might need advice on how to pivot. You may need advice on how do you make some tough decisions when the economy is the way that it is. So consider doing that. Bethany on the right side, I'm sure will put a link in there so you can sign up for that. Those are all the announcements. Now let's get to my friend Brad. Brad, I have known Brad for many, many years, and I'm thankful he's going to join us today. Brad this week came out with a book called Becoming Better Grownups, Rediscovering What Matters and Remembering How to Fly. And he's the founder of Kid President. He's done so many creative projects over the years that I've been a huge fan of. And in a day when we need a little bit of joy, he's the perfect person to join us. So I'm going to turn Brad on here. And before he responds to this whole thing, I do want everyone on the right side in the plywood incredible way to give Brad a standing ovation with emojis of hands in some capacity on the right side to welcome Brad Montague to the Black Box session. Welcome, Brad. How are you?
Oh, Jeff, thank you. Thank you, everybody. It's good to see you. It's good to see any person right now. Really.
Oh, it's good to be with you. What a week to launch a book, huh? That's a little different.
Thought it would be a good idea. Thought it's a great time to release a book when bookstores are closed.
Yes,
Thought that'd be different. Everybody releases books when things are easy.
Right.
Come on, John Grisham. So I thought it was a bad idea.
Obviously, it was not your plan to have it that way, but I love seeing how you're pivoting and changing and doing it in a creative new way. And I want to get into some questions with you today. Is that cool?
Yes, the hot box. Let's
go. The hot box with Jeff. Here it is.
Somebody in the comments mentioned an old failed project that I feel like needs a polar bear coloring book. Was thing that I had.
What is the polar bear? I know what this is. Care about that.
Makes me laugh. Yeah, I started drawing it and I thought this is gonna be cool, and then I realized polar bears were white. I thought this is just not gonna work out. So I thought maybe he'd have some sort of disorder and he'd have skin, like no fur, so he could color the skin, and it just got sad. So
basically,
thank you for reminding me of my failure, AK.
The non-coloring color book. I love it. Okay, so you've been working on this project for 3 years, at least, probably more than that. What have you learned about in that process? I mean, it takes a long time. I mean, I know there's people listening right now that are working on projects that it seems like it's never going to come to life. What have you learned through the process of creating something and the time that it takes?
I think this goes with the book. This goes with a film, a business, any project. It always reveals things about you that you maybe weren't aware are there, or you were, and then it heightens them, it highlights them, it just pulls all of that out. Everything from strengths to insecurities to weaknesses, like all that stuff comes up. Writing definitely is one of those spaces where the more you do it, the more you discover about yourself that isn't always attractive. And I thought it would be easy. I thought this is going to be easy. I've written every day for my whole life. Like I've written for TV, I written for the web, I've released things on a daily basis, a book, no problem. Like I thought, okay, and I mapped it out, 15 chapters. I thought I'll do a chapter a day. I'll have this thing done in half a month, and then I'll spend the rest of the month. I'll spend my advance money. That's what I'll do. And that was dumb. It took about in the book. It's about a week per sentence.
Wow. You were stuck along the way? You were stuck?
A good week. Well, you write and then you turn it in and you realize, wait, that made no sense. Wait, I forgot this. Wait, and it reveals so much about your own communication. It reveals so much about the nugget of the idea you started with starts to lose itself almost, and then you have to keep going back to it. And I worked with a really brilliant editor who was no nonsense, and I'm about 90% nonsense, and she so like it was such a challenge, and yet like she made me so much better because she helped me realize how many times I would stray from that original nugget. Um, and it also started out not even as a book. Like it started out like I just really needed to visit schools. Um, we had finished a big web series. I had finished other projects that failed, and I just didn't know what my next move would be because they kept getting shut down. And the one thing that was coming through was teachers would reach out and say, "We're using your videos in classrooms, and my kids just want to talk to you. They want to show you something." And that was the one space in my life, aside from my family, where all they wanted me to do was just show up. Like they weren't asking anything of me. They weren't requesting that I create something or promote anything for them. Like literally, they just wanted to say what their class was doing. They wanted me to hear it. Like I just had to show up. And it was this healing thing. Like I got invited to just be who I am in a classroom and witness what was happening. And then I realized I've got to find a way to keep being in this space. So I set up a listening tour where I could visit classrooms, whether it was virtually or in person, and just hear what kids had to say about what it means to grow up. And then it turned into a book. Slowly.
So listening to her, how many people did you listen? How many kids did you listen to? How many teachers did you listen to?
My office was this just big map with yarn. I looked like a conspiracy theorist. It was just like places that were schools that looked like Hogwarts and places that were schools that had no money, no budget, homeschools. I learned about unschooling. A lot of that happening right now. I learned a lot about what different learning environments, and so I started realizing, oh, I have 10 schools in this state. I have this, and it ended up being multiple. I just wanted one in each state, and it ended up being multiple in all states, hundreds of schools, and then I realized maybe I should actually not just talk to kids, but also talk to adults. So I interviewed people who were elderly.
So you mentioned something a minute ago. You said, I could be in the class and just whether you're probably on Skype or on something like this, and you're just talking to people. And you said I could just be who I am.
Yeah.
In the book, you talk about that tension of who am I, right? Like, what did you learn about it through that and that process of who you really are?
Yeah, there's something really valuable about revisiting childhood, the child you were. For some, that can be especially challenging because of trauma. For all of us, regardless of what kind of childhood you had, there's stuff there that piled up or that you forgot about. And there's almost in the same way you start a project and then you kind of forget why you started it. Our lives, if we can take a moment to get back to who we were when we all started this, it reveals so much about what gifts we already have, what we already bring to the table, and that's enough. And I found too, if I got really nervous, I would be like in these boardrooms, like in LA, be these really impressive people I'd be nervous to talk with. But then when we started talking about their favorite teachers or start talking about their favorite books when they were kids or the things that inspired them when they were kids, their favorite cereal the whole room would change. The tone of the room would change. Their posture changed. Like everybody would turn into kids. The same way when I was doing interviews, when we were filming the Kid President web series, and normally if you did an interview, there's a certain kind of cadence, there's a certain kind of attitude. But when you bring in a string and a tin can, and you have to say, "I'm sorry, Michelle Obama, if you could actually talk into the can and then hold it to your ear," like it changes everything. The whole mood, it becomes playful. and there's this freedom to it. And when you really get to that place, then you're at the true place.
Yeah, when you say that, it kind of takes me back. Last fall, I went to this place called Onsite, which is outside of Nashville.
With Miles.
Yeah, with Miles, and did some kind of deep work within myself, and still unpacking a lot of that, honestly. Part of what they talk about is this this inner child that we have, and it sounds like that's kind of what you're. Even in the book, you don't use that language, the therapy language, but that's kind of like refinding who you are when you were 7. And you share this story in a book. I'd love for you to share a piece of it when you were on a stage with, you said 3 other people that seemed way more important than you, and the kid asked a question. Can you share that story a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's because I think this is where we all find it, because a lot of the people, I know some of the names in this conversation, and some of the people in the plywood community, we don't all have jobs that are easily defined. In those conversations with people like, so what do you do? Like all that stuff. There's kind of like, well, what day is it? What time? Like, I don't know how to talk about what I do. And so when you find yourself and there's a panel, like I got invited to a school and this teacher was saying, okay, I just want to show them it's career day. I want to show them some different grown-ups. So there was somebody who worked in politics. There's somebody in law enforcement and a veterinarian. And then me, like, she's like, so what should I tell the kids you do? And I'm just like, oh no, like this is not good. Because the kids immediately know, oh, the vet, and she even had animals. Like everybody knew what she did. Like everybody knew immediately what these people were about. And I'm thinking, I don't want these kids to be me. Like this is bad guidance on the teacher's part to even put me up here. They should do something that is easily recognizable and essential. And then a kid in the classroom, they're asking questions, and all of them had questions for the vet, and very few, and this one kid in the back raised his hand, and he's like, what were you like as a kid? And it was like, to me, and the teacher then interrupted my answer, and she said, this is Marcus. He's one of our artists. And you could tell he was a little shy. And she started to point in the room, like all the stuff he had made, and that she had really helped like hone in on his creativity and made it part of the classroom culture. And you could tell she was very supportive of his gentle kind of creative spirit. And that was this massive moment of realizing that I was this person that he needed to hear from, that all those other people were great, but that he was on a path of being an artist, and he needed to know, am I okay? Is it okay to like feel these feelings, to make these drawings, to want to do all this stuff? And I shared that in the book because I know so many people I love feel the same thing I do, of feeling like, well, what do I even have to share at the table? Like, what am I even going to bring to this? There's other people, there's other better grown-ups than me. When the truth is, there's no better grown-up for the kids in your midst than you. Like literally you being in that room as who you are adds something that is needed.
Meanwhile, it's so hard to believe that. I mean, it's good to hear it, but it's hard to believe it. I mean, that's the
I'm great at telling everybody else that. and I felt that, so many times people will send me my own things from Instagram. I'll be like, oh, I'm having a bad day. Oh, I don't like myself. Oh, and they'll send me like a post I had done on Instagram. They're like, well, this is a really encouraging thing from somebody, and you should listen to him. He's pretty smart. I'm like,
yeah, thanks.
Rats.
Yeah.
Rats.
It's funny you talk about, my kids, their friends are always like, what does your dad do? Because their parents all have very similar things. And it's like, I don't know. They're like,
what do your kids say?
They say, he's on the internet. You can look him up.
He's just Jeff.
He has some things on the internet. Okay. Okay. So going back to the book a little bit, I mean, I think at no time have I ever wanted to read some of the things you said, or have they been more relevant to me than right now? Because I'm spending 24 hours a day with my kids. Um, so on one hand, some moments I'm like, get these kids out. I need to move on. I need to do something different, right? Let's get this virus done. And on the other hand, I think reading your book, it makes me want to connect with the kids and be more curious.
Yeah.
What positive things could you encourage us in this moment right now related to that tension? Could you share?
Yeah. Well, one thing is the last thing I feel like I want to be doing right now is talking about a book. I see so much hurt in the world and people I love, and I'm thinking like I wish that I didn't have a book coming out right now. And then there's this other thing that's been happening of discovering that the message is relevant at this point and that people do need it, and that in this moment they want to be reminded that their presence matters to the people around them. There's a musician, he's in like a bunch of punk bands in the 70s and 80s, Jonathan Richman. And when I met him, I've always loved his music, and I asked him if he had any advice for young artists, and he said, just write something that's true. And which is funny because his songs are about ice cream trucks and stuff. But Jonathan Richman told me to write something that's true. And so I thought about that with the book. Like, okay, I just want this to be always true. And I'm being challenged right now because the world in which I wrote it is different than the world in which it's existing. And I'm also discovering that it's always true, that our presence in the lives of the people around us, young and old, matters. And one of the things with good grown-ups, whether you have kids or you are an aunt or uncle or friend or neighbor or someone who writes for children or has a business that serves families, there is something that's so important for us to remember. And it's this idea that children can sometimes, we can deify them and make it seem like they're beautiful and perfect. And that's not true. And parents at home are discovering that part of it, in which there's discipline, there's this unending supply of energy they have. And you're thinking, I wish they could just calm down and go to sleep already. And then there's this childish thing that comes up, but then there's the childlike spirit. And that childlike spirit is what we talk about when we talk about how wonderful children are. And what our job is to cultivate that childlike spirit in the kids around us and the kid inside of all of us. And right now, in a sea of uncertainty, in a time in which we're being pushed to be together in what can feel like not a home, but a pressure cooker or something like that, it is important that we walk through this in a childlike way, not a childish way. And being open with the kids that you are going through this with them. And when they see you do that, it helps them mature. When you talk about your fears, you talk about how you don't have all the answers and that maybe you are a little afraid. That's okay, as long as you do it in a childlike way that's generous, that's curious, and that allows for wonder instead of worry. And I just before this, I had to I did a conversation that was with a whole bunch of healthcare workers, and so it's all these hospitals from all over the U.S. and they're pausing to just hear some encouragement. And it was really heavy because I'm thinking they're on the front lines of a crisis right now. They are healing people. They are seeing firsthand the darkness. They're showing up. And so I was really nervous about doing it. And so I got to show you what I wore tap shoes so that so that So that in our conversation right now, I could keep playful, but also they had no idea that this guy speaking to us right now, trying to encourage us, he's super nervous and feeling like this is going to be really heavy. He's going to be wearing tap shoes. So there's things you can do that help you remember this is heavy, but let's dance through it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of part of the tension, though. It's like, thanks for that. Now every couple of minutes we'll hear you tapping a little bit, but these are like grown-up problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is that tension between, and in the book you wrote something about youthful optimism versus grown-up cynicism.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I think that for me, I felt like I existed on two planets, that I would sometimes live and sit in grown-up cynicism, and then occasionally would jet over to this optimistic, youthful place. And I was orbiting between the two. Like I would go back and forth. And I thought, okay, I've got to choose one. I need to choose one. So for a while, I just chose the childlike place, that planet. But there's something about that cynicism that it comes from a place of hurt, but it also comes from a place of experience, which from experience comes wisdom. So the answer isn't choosing one or the other planet. It's living between those and holding hands. It's saying, I want the wonder of a child and the wisdom of somebody who's lived through the hard stuff. And it's not blind optimism, it's fierce hope. It's not naivete, it's not any of that. It's I'm aware, I've seen what could happen, but I'm going to go through this with childlike spirit.
That's hard to do. I'm going to open up. I'm going to look at some of the questions. I have a lot more questions for you, but I'm going to read some that are here. And if you have a question, make sure you ask it and vote on the ones that are up there as it's changing right in front of me. This is from Jonathan Chambers. Brad, what are the 3 or 4 main traits that make a kid so an adult can foster those traits more?
Yeah. One is curiosity. They want to know about the world, and they're not afraid to ask about it. So it's the things that they see, they're aware of. I don't know about it, I want to know. And that is a childlike place of feeling new and not feeling like I know it all. And then there's also, children have this unending ability. It's like a superpower to notice things. Children are noticers of the little things. They hear things we don't hear. They see things we don't hear. Sometimes we will see all of the clouds in the sky and they can see the bird, or they will see the crack. I remember when we visited the White House, and like we were there, and I'm at the White House with the 10-year-old, and I was seeing all of this stuff I'd seen in pictures and soaking it in. And he when he tells the story, he remembers how the floor creaked, and he's like, it felt like an old building. Like his memory of it was so different. So they notice things we don't notice. And there's also, children have this fight in them to find joy. Even in places where they're scared, where they are uncomfortable, to discover something to laugh about, some way to have a game, to make it a game, to play. And I think that is brilliant. When you see a kid who's been through a lot do that, your respect for the brilliance of children grows.
Okay, here's a question from Dr. Jerome Lubba.
Dr. Jerome, hey, pal.
So often we make an effort to encourage kids to find the silver lining, find the positive, be positive. How do you find space to encourage kids and the kids in us to share what hurts in a safe way? How do you make space for the pragmatism in contrast to the positive side.
That is so good. That is such like this has been something I've been wanting to model more, and I'm still learning it. Because one of the things that people would say a lot about the YouTube channel that I worked for, Soul Pancake, and sometimes the Kid President videos, if they just watched one video or whatever, they'd say, "Oh, it's so positive." And I think that word, that feels so small, that feels so blind to just be positive, because it wasn't coming from just a be happy place. It was coming from that fierce, hopeful place that we've seen the hard stuff, we've been through it, but we're going to dance through it anyway. And one of the things that I've started doing is trying to like recently I was in a classroom and a kid asked me a question. He's like, "Why do you wear a hat?" And I said, "Well," and I showed him that I have a scar on the top of my head. I have a scar that goes from the back all the way here. And I tell him that when I was a kid, I had a surgery on my skull that was growing the wrong way. And it was very dangerous. And that I have always been self-conscious about that scar. And so I opened up to him about this scar and that I could have died. And that every day in the morning, when I wash my hair in the shower, when I do that, I think about how grateful I am that I'm here. And so then another kid raised their hand and started to tell me about a scar he had on his leg. And it's just, a fall, but it was big to him and it was emotional, and he starts talking about it. And I think the more the grown-ups in their lives could talk about their scars, the more it makes them feel like it's okay for them to talk about theirs, even if they're fresh and they're still hurting. That's probably the best time for them to be doing it. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. I've never heard that story before, but you never told me about your scar. I thought we were close.
I know. I only recently felt like I could share that with kids, and
literally, true story. I wrote down. I'm gonna ask. Because I'm expecting you to have a hat on. I was gonna ask it. I was literally gonna say, "Why do you always wear a hat?" I promise you. And I was like, he's gonna shake that off. He's gonna think that's a dumb question. I don't know. I wrote that down. That's so. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Here's another question. This is from Bethany from our team. How do you process everything that surfaces, especially the not so attractive stuff when you're creating something? Yeah, that's a great question.
I feel like it takes me more time, and I'm just now accepting that about myself, that it does take me a little bit more time to process big news, hard transitions. When everything happened with the situation we're in now, COVID-19 happened, and I had to cancel all of my book events, media tour, all that. It's shredded into confetti. And I think a couple of years ago, I would have gone into a deep spiral. I would have tried to plow through and just deal with it, and then it would have piled up later. But what I had to do was sort of sit in that grief and just acknowledge, yes, there's worse things than that could happen. There's other people dealing with bigger, but this does hurt. This is a loss. This is going to affect the book in a big way. But I'm going to grieve. And I allowed us a couple of days to just sit in it, feel it. And then I'm not fully okay, but it was able to pick up and then move forward. And I also have to think about things from all sides of the table. And I think about it like hard news, good news, any news. Think about it like it's in the center of a table, and you can sit sometimes from the perspective of somebody who's in power or somebody who is going to be affected negatively, or as a child at the table. When a child sees the table, they don't see the top of it. They see the bottom with the gum and the gunk. What does this mean for all perspectives? And so that takes time, and I'm allowing myself to be slower about how I respond to things and allow myself to feel it.
Yeah,
Does
and
that make sense, Jeff?
it does. It's interesting. I was thinking about this because my wife and I have been working on this project for the last 3 years. The first time our podcast went live, I guess this was 2 years ago. It was like the week before it went live, and this was like the first creative project my wife, her heart was in. It was always my previous creative project, and I don't have permission to share the story, but I'm going to share it anyways. And she started freaking out. Like, it was like she started second guessing everything. She's like, maybe we shouldn't do it. We should just cancel this whole thing. We're everything is ready. We have weeks of podcasts ready, and I started seeing her fears coming out for the first time. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, the previous 15 years, she had been dealing with my fears, and I was like, what just happened? Like, this is the first time that you're on the other side, and I started feeling what had always been coming out of me. And so I would add to that, I think you said something about seeing things from all sides of the table. Like, are you filling that table with other people,
mm-hmm.
Where mm-hmm. they can speak into those moments, the people that you really need to hear from. And sometimes I think most of the time for me, I can't see it from the other side of the table, but usually my wife.
I love you. You have done this with a lot of people. I think this is a thing you ask a lot, is if somebody says, should I do this? Or I have an idea, and you always point them, what do the people you love think? Like, as that's like some element within that. What are the people who know you and care about you and you respect? Like, what do they say about this? That has been really life-giving advice for me when there's so many other people I let sometimes take over the conversation. But then to say, okay, what are the people that actually love me, know, and feel about this?
Mm. All right, you shared this. Andre and I got to interview you and your wife, which was fun. It was apparently it was the first interview you guys ever done together, which I can't believe.
It was so fun. Yeah, Christy and I loved talking to you guys.
She's much smarter than you, but
that's a fact. Yep, she's here. She's gonna say anything.
I love something you shared on that, and it's in your book, and I want you to share it. Can you tell us about the lobster story? I think it's so profound.
Yeah, well, I've always loved that Eric Carle book, the Very Hungry Caterpillar, and yet at the same time, it gave me this feeling of so much pressure, because it planted this idea in my head that I would arrive. This moment of arrival in which I came out of the cocoon and I am this beautiful butterfly. Instead, I'm like the very awkward caterpillar that went through the cocoon, and then I'm like, yay! Oh no, I'm still me. I'm just an awkward butterfly. Please don't look at me. And to find out though that growth doesn't have to look like that. Like, I love the idea of transformation and all that. I get it, but lobsters do something that we don't talk about enough, and this molting process of their insides get so big that their outside can't contain it anymore, and so their shell will crack. And then they realize this is happening, so then they take in more moisture and they let their insides get so big that the outside cracks, and then they have to fight to make the shell break off, and then they have no shell. They're just this squishy blob, and they're blind. They're turned inside out, so they're vulnerable to predators, and so they have to go hide in a safe place, like under a rock, and they are blind, vulnerable, and just this mushy blob. They wait for the new shell to grow. And then when it does, they go out of the rock until it cracks again. And so they do it hundreds of times. Just in the first year of a lobster's life, it's going through this process again and again. And its whole life is spent growing or healing from just growing. And I think how healthy that would be to approach everything in our lives that way of, I'm not done yet. I'm a work in progress all the time, and I'm growing, and I'm going to help others grow. I'm growing, and I'm going to heal from the growth I just went through, and what that would lead to. I think about kind of the life goals I have for growing older, and it's to just never stop growing. To an older man I talked to, he told me one of his secrets to staying young was to always have a dream. that like he's always had dreams, and that gave me a lot of insight to think about. He's always had something that he was dreaming about to march towards, to live for. So I want to always have dreams and always be growing.
So with that though, like, I think people that don't know you probably see your successes. They see what has come to the life that is successful. People that do know you, we know you get sucked up in the things that didn't work, right? It consumes you, right? And it's hard, it's hurtful. And so how do you get through those? How have you gotten through those seasons when it's been hurtful to keep creating? Because right now there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people that can't do what they had planned on doing.
Yeah.
Right. And I've sat with you in moments when you were wrestling with that, when something didn't go as planned. You've gone through that. I've seen you go through that many times. And what advice do you give to others that are in that? Because whatever was planned has been changed, you know? Yeah. So how do you keep creating? How do you keep going when everything is not what you had expected?
Yeah. I'm gonna get mine.
I know we're all on the edge of our seat right now, wondering, he's got tap shoes on. What is he going to come to?
I had to go get my nap. Sorry. Could you hear the tapping?
Yeah, every single step.
So, let's see. This is a map. Can you see?
We can lose this because it's a map, yeah.
So, I created this map for all these different places that I found myself visiting all the time, like the Sea of Insecurity, Wonder Mountain. That's a pretty cool place to be. There's let's see, the Mines of Hustle. That's a place a lot of people spend time. The comment section, there's not a lot of life there. There's other places, the Fog of Fear. All these places that you can visit. And the Tar Pits of Approval is a place I got stuck a lot. All these places that you visit. And I had to give myself permission to go all over this map every single day. And then I also had to remind myself that I can go to Doubt Valley. I can visit the Fog of Fear and all these places. But where I need to be at some point, and where all of you need to be, and Jeff, you create this for people with campfires. And that's the place of community where you can listen. You don't always have to share, but you can at least be there in the warmth and hear the stories of wisdom of people who've survived it, who've gone through it. But occasionally we need you to show up at that campfire and let us know where you've been. Because we are all explorers of this map all day long in so many ways, in our businesses, in our families, in our relationships. And I shared it for fourth graders. Like, I thought this would be a great way for me not to speak, but just to lay the map out and say, okay, guys, let's go hunting for treasure. Where are you right now? And they immediately got it. This is a shortcut. But then when I started sharing it with former kids like you, I started to see that it was still true. And it has been so helpful for me to think about, I can go through these challenges, but I also need to find a campfire, a bonfire of belonging. And if there's not one, I'm going to create it.
Hmm.
And I've run a summer camp for several years, and I know the power of a campfire. Like just the smell of it, you can see it from afar. Like everybody can see it, and they want to be at the campfire. And one of the coolest things, a counselor, and we tell them this. Well, the coolest things you can do for a kid is to say, "Oh, come sit by me at the campfire," and to say their name, and, and say their name, and sit at the campfire, and say, "Let's make s'mores, let's talk." And that's there's just immeasurable value in doing that for each other.
There's a whole bunch of people in the comments asking where they can buy it. Looks like Christy just put up a link.
Oh, she's so smart.
Yeah.
So good.
But
It's also in the book.
Yeah.
And what's cool, and I was sharing this map everywhere, and then people started sending other places they discovered on the map, because I told them it's not done. I'm not like a full cartographer. I need you to help. And so people discovered, like, some kids flipped the map over and they said there's an upside down, and they would like find something else, or like I found a portal and it leads to another map, and this brilliant creativity. But Seth Godin said that we don't reward people who follow maps, we reward people who make them. And so I took that literally and just like, let's make a map.
I love it. I love it. Oh, well, there's some incredible comments over here on the side. It's so funny. One of the, I see Chrissy Majors commenting over here. I don't know if you know Chrissy, but she's one of the people I've always wanted you to meet because she's with Ron Clark Academy. And so someday you'll
That
come
place
to
is a dream. I would love that.
Yeah. So anyway, so you
What
guys.
they do for kids is just incredible.
Okay, last question for me, and then I want to be respectful of your time. I don't know how many more interviews you have. My question for you would be, there's a whole bunch of people listening right now that are questioning a lot of things in life. And so one thing I've always appreciated about you, even though you sit and have hard moments in life, I feel like you've always, for me, have been a person on the second half of that conversation that lifts my spirits. So if you were sitting face to face with one of the people that is in the comments right now, listening on, that just needs a little bit of encouragement today, what would you say to them?
Yeah. I see you, and it's okay. And I hope you know just how much you're not alone. And one of the things that I'm seeing right now, that because things are so heavy, and there's so many people that I love that are wrestling with the unimaginable, and yet we see these stories of people that they're sharing things. There's an image of a man who's holding up a sign through a window to thank people who saved his wife's life. He's showed up at the emergency room and he's holding that, and you can see the look on his eyes. And somebody shared that image and put the caption, "This is who we are." And that hits me so hard, because I think that is what we do for each other, is we can remind each other who we are. And I hope that in hard times we can all be little reminders to each other of who we are as humans, what we can do for each other as humans, that we can walk through this not alone but together in a way that is going to show people who we are.
Mm.
And yeah, there's not enough words for what could be said to someone hurting or in a time of uncertainty. But the fact that, and I shared an image of this on Instagram of like a storybook of two people that are characters in a storybook, and they look down at the words, and the story's always been the same, but suddenly it's been scratched through. And they're like, oh no, we haven't got to this part in the story before. We don't know what happens next. And I want all the people in my life, in my orbit, to know that we may not know what's going to happen next, but at least we can turn the page and write what happens next together. We will respond to this together.
I love that. Hopefully that's a little encouragement. In the poll I saw, there was like 35% of the people, the feeling they had today was that they were sad. And I hope Brad brought you a little bit of encouragement and life today, and you needed to hear that. I will say, if someone on my team, I would love for you guys to put a link right now to the Amazon page for Brad's book. He's not asked me to do this. I want to do this. He's getting all embarrassed, but this is exciting. I love this moment. Put a link on there. If you have not bought this book, I want to encourage you to go support Brad right now. And if you have gotten it, then do a review on Amazon for him, because that'll help him also. I've been reading it the last 2 days. It came out on Tuesday. Actually, I started reading it yesterday, Wednesday morning. And it was so good for me to see the world through the lens of my children. And that book is helping me do that again, instead of only through the eyes of an adult. And so that's my pitch. Go get his book today. Go support him and Christy. They're amazing people, incredible friends. Thank you, Brad, for joining us today.
Thank you, Jeff.
And I know that this week was not what you had originally expected, but I love how you've had to pivot and make the best of this situation, just like all of us, right? Just like all of us. This week is not
like every person. Yes,
what's expected.
No, and thank you. And it means so much to me to be able to like connect to the plywood community, because early on, this was just a vital bonfire of belonging for me, of feeling like I've got all this weirdness, I don't know what to do with it. Jeff, help. And I appreciate all you do to speak life and hope into people, and point them towards what matters so they can create things that matter.
Love it. Well, everyone here, thanks for listening in. We'll be on here next Thursday, another Black Box virtual session with some new friends we'll introduce you to. And we hope you have a great day. We hope you find peace and in the midst of crazy times, that you breathe in and breathe out very slowly, and enjoy this unique moment in time. We'll see you all next week. Brad, Christy, have a great day.